Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, brothers and sisters. One thing I don't quite understand about all the recent protests about racism, right, is what do people actually want? Okay, let me explain what I mean. We see that the protests over the George Floyd killings continue and have spread over to other places in the world. And even though the protests have been grouped under the Black Lives Matter banner, we see that people of all backgrounds are part of these protests, which include Muslims. However, brothers and sisters, a very important question must be asked. What exactly are people calling for? Yes, we know that the slogans are to remove racism. However, how will racism be eradicated? Who will eradicate it? How will this change look? Will this come in the form of a change to legislation? Does it mean stricter laws against racists? And the reason why I bring this up is because, as I previously explained in other videos, it is the ideology of capitalism that breeds all kinds of discriminations, which includes racism. So unless the demonstrators are calling for a complete change of system, moving away from capitalism, then anything less will not deal with the problem of racism, as the root problem is the actual belief itself. And this is why, brothers and sisters, racism cannot be eradicated by rules, laws and governance, because racism is a thought. It's a thought that people carry which emanates from their viewpoint about man, life and universe. So unless people change their viewpoints in life, unless they replace the thought of racism with a better thought, racism will remain in people and flourish in society. Let's take America as an example. We see that between 1774 and 1804, all of the northern states abolished slavery, even though it was not abolished in the south, as it was vital to their economy. Further, we see that in 1808, the US Congress outlawed the African slave trade. However, the domestic trade flourished and the enslaved population in the US nearly tripled over the next 50 years. And after the Civil War, which was fought between the North and the South, we see that in 1865, the 13th Amendment finally abolished slavery in the United States. Now you may wonder, why am I highlighting these dates to you, right? Well, this goes back to my point that rules, laws or amendments to the Constitution cannot change thoughts unless the viewpoint in life, the most basic thought on which all other thoughts are built, is not changed. So we see that in America, slavery was abolished when the 13th Amendment was adopted. We see that previously enslaved men and women received the rights of citizenship and the equal protection of the Constitution in the 14th Amendment, and then they were given the right to vote in the 15th Amendment. But nothing changed in reality. These provisions of Constitution were ignored and violated, and almost a century later, the existing racism and discrimination would lead to the civil rights movements in the 1960s. And subhanallah, here we are having the same discussion in 2020. So was the 13th, 14th and 15th Amendment able to remove racism? Absolutely not. And this, brothers and sisters, is because even though amendments were adopted in the Constitution, the culture was not changed. The racist thought that the masses carried were not replaced with better thoughts. Hence why the view that the blacks were worthless, the blacks were inferior, the superiority of the white man exists to this very day, from the lower parts of society all the way to the very top in the White House. Another example to highlight the point I'm making is with the prohibition in the United States. Prohibition in the United States was a nationwide constitutional ban on the production, importation, transportation and sale of alcoholic beverages from 1920 to 1933. However, did this change the behavior of the masses? No, it didn't. People started smuggling alcohol, and gangsters like Al Capone became very rich and powerful, and the outcome was that this ban was eventually lifted and everything went back to how it was. So we see that racism is a rotten fruit of the ideology of capitalism, which means that the eradication of racism cannot happen until the ideology of capitalism itself is eradicated and replaced with another ideology which can unite mankind, regardless of race, color, lineage, or social status. And we see even today in the US, Minnesota lawmakers, they have pledged to dismantle its police department. They are promising to create instead a new system of public safety, whilst the New York mayor, Bill de Blasio, he said that he would cut the city's $6 billion police budget and spend it instead on social services. However, these are just attempts at diverting the attention from the real issue at hand, which is the inherent problems in capitalism and its inability to bring about unity even within its own adherents. Brothers and sisters, if those who are calling for change will settle for a tweak in the policing laws, or tougher laws against racism, or even a toppling of a statue, then I'm afraid to say that they are going to be very disappointed with the outcome for all of their efforts. If people want true change, then what is needed is not a patch-up of the prevailing system. Rather, a completely radical change is needed, which ultimately starts with the ideas and the thoughts that people carry. Subhanallah, if we truly want change, then we will need to move the goalposts, the parameters which have been set by the capitalists in order to keep the masses debating trivial matters rather than addressing the failure of the ideology of capitalism, as they know people would start looking for an alternative system to govern their lives. And as I have mentioned before, brothers and sisters, Islam is the only solution to racism, and the Islamic Aqidah is the only bond that can truly unite mankind into one brotherhood. I'll leave you on that note. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.